pleased to welcome to the stage Peter King from Cypher Robotics, Tony Agar, the General Manager of Group Sales North for Spark, and Chris Bishop, the Head of APAC for Ipsotek. Please give them a warm welcome. Kia ora, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us for the final panel of the inaugural Spark Accelerate. I thought it would be good to start with, for the benefit of the audience, a little bit of an explanation as to what Ipsotek and Cypher Robotics do. Chris, can I start with you? Can you tell us about the tech that you're deploying at Ipsotek?
Certainly, yes. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Good afternoon. So Ipsotek is an AI computer vision company, software business. And what we do is we work with partners like Spark to deliver solutions to customers like yourselves. And that allows us to use our AI technology, coupled with something called scenario-based rules. And this capability then matches the requirements that you have, the business challenges that you face. And we deploy these solutions across multiple sectors. And I'm pleased to say that we're very happy to be working with Spark, and already we're seeing some traction here in New Zealand.
Can you give us an idea of the applications of the technology?
Certainly. Imagine you're in a warehouse and you have forklift trucks and people. Those two things should never come together. If they do, it could be quite serious. So using a geospatial algorithm, which is our technical term, we can identify an AI object, which is a person, and an AI object, which is a forklift truck, in real time. So if either comes closer than the designated safe distance that you've specified in your health and safety manuals, we generate an alert. The alert can then trigger an audio device or a visual device, and everybody can then stop.
So that's one application, but I mean, there's plenty, right, in what you do out there in crowd management, security. Can you paint a bit more of a picture for us?
Certainly. If we look at sort of crowd management, imagine you have a big event. Being an ex-rugby player, obviously you play rugby here in New Zealand and do very well. When you're managing large crowds at stadiums, there are pinch points within stadiums. You want everybody to be able to go to the merchandising area, the food and beverage area, and using AI computer vision, you can calculate how many people are in a certain area. Are you starting to exceed the safe number for that zone? And if you are, then alerts can be generated inside your control room, so the operators visually can now see they're encroaching on what might be a safety aspect, and they can then interject and deal with that situation. Likewise, at a train station, if you have trains coming in either side on the platforms, the platform becomes very busy. Again, you may exceed the safety threshold for the number of passengers that are waiting there for trains, etc. So you end up with a holistic view of what is happening, whether it's a stadium, whether it's an airport, whether it's a large event in a city, or inside your warehouse.
Yeah, so there's heaps of applications.
Yes.
If I can bring you in here, Peter King, the Chief Executive of Cypher Robotics. I guess robotics are the Hollywood interpretation of the future of AI, but can you tell us how your technology is applying that?
Oh, that's an interesting concept, because I would tell you that we utilize robotics to actually solve dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs. It's not so much the Hollywood of AI, and in fact, if we can solve challenging problems that are big problems with simple devices, is really what we focus on, trying to make sure our clients get, our clients are able to take advantage of the technology that's not so complicated to deploy to solve some of these challenging problems.
So what kind of dull and dirty problems are you solving?
So Cypher Robotics is specifically focused around inventory counting in a warehouse. It's an interesting story how it came about. And so a client of ours from another organization, a research and development organization, approached us and said, hey, we want you to put drones in our warehouse. And it was an interesting discussion to begin with. We thought it was hard and didn't sound like something that was achievable until we actually took a very close look at it. We were able to create a solution that's not very challenging to install and does a very good job of counting inventory within a warehouse environment, solving both efficiencies, saving our clients money, and actually keeping their employees much happier.
Can you give us some examples of it at work and what it's actually achieved? Is this about so that no one's in there doing stock take, forgetting, when they get to 1,453, they lose count?
Yeah.
Is it just about the efficiencies and removing the human error? Is it about safety? Is it about something else?
It's quite the opposite. And so there's this big conversation around are robots taking our jobs. I would tell you that our company, and there's this real big shift in the robotics industry that is saying we are actually looking to tackle the jobs that we as employees don't want to enter into anymore. So, there are many jobs out there that are extremely dangerous, that are challenging to hire for, that are challenging to keep employees engaged, keep trained. Right? And so those are the things that we find are the most efficient when it comes to robotics. And so by solving some of these really big problems that we're struggling with employees in, we can showcase a significant return and keep the employees happy without having to reduce those staff members and allowing them to traditionally go be a little bit more efficient in the roles that they're actually targeting.
So it's not just about cost saving, it's actually about employee satisfaction. They don't have to do the drudge work that the robot can do. They can go do something that's maybe a little bit more stimulating.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I mean, inherently humans are very smart, right? That's something that...
most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. And so, any role by a human that is extremely mundane, where you have to shut off for the whole day, something that's going to give you carpal tunnel to move something from one place to another. Inventory counting is one of those really difficult jobs to employ for because for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, you're really turned off. You are, you would have a machine that is counting UPC codes all day long. But traditionally, that employee is also responsible for multiple tasks within a warehouse. So now we can have them focus on solving difficult problems and having something like a robot go and complete the mundane tasks and allow it to do it in off hours as well, so that we open a little more efficiency for the warehouse too.
One of the things I was really interested to read is that you are actually developing courses to help train people on the jobs that the robots create, which kind of flips on its head this idea that the robots are just stealing our jobs, but actually they're creating new ones. We just need to learn how to be capable of doing them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at the robotics industry as this complex, difficult industry to get into. I can tell you that myself, I do not have an engineering degree. I have an economics degree, right? So helping people understand the types of roles that are available in robotics, help them understand what challenges are in the robotics industry. So think things like robotics maintenance and technicians that are now necessary, much like your car mechanic. Robots will eventually fail and we need people to fix them. Engineering talents are obviously a big part of robotics, so keeping them in focus in what we do in robotics is something that a lot of engineers haven't actually considered. Right? So a lot of electrical engineers may go off into different trades, but bringing them over to the robotics industry and showcasing that it's not that difficult to get into is something that we're pretty passionate about.
And Chris, obviously we're focusing on return on investment here. So when you're dealing with a customer, how are you proving the case for the adoption of the technology? Is it a dipping the toe in the water? Is it the piloting the project? Or do you have to go headlong into it to work out whether it's actually going to deliver you a return?
That's a good question. The first thing we do with all our customers, we ask them, what are you trying to solve? We don't go in to sell the software, we listen. And that's a really important first step, because in some cases, you don't need our enterprise software. You could use something in a camera. The next stage, when the customer says, this is our challenge, whether it's security, health and safety, or security, we then take them down a path where we deploy a proof of concept. And the proof of concept is deliberate because it forces the end customer to think about what are the success criteria that they will judge this POC by. And in all of our deployments across the APAC region, and our region starts in Kazakhstan, goes to Japan, and comes down to New Zealand, we deploy this methodology, and it works. And in many of the cases, once the POC has delivered the results that the end customer is looking to assess, we then move into a full deployment.
The POC was a new acronym I learnt yesterday, actually, from Tony. So thank you, Tony. This is the proof of concept.
Proof of concept. I apologize.
When you're dealing with clients, how often are you having to challenge them that they're not just doing the tech for tech's sake, that they've actually already thought through what they're trying to achieve, how they're going to get there, and what they're willing to invest up front?
Yeah. Chris and I were talking about this backstage. That ROI piece at the beginning and the proof of concept to move to pilot is key. If you're not sitting down with a customer and figuring out from a solution endpoint back of what they're trying to achieve. Is it compliance? Is it increased productivity? Is there a health and safety aspect to it, or a number of those things? And then what are the time of people and costs that are required to do that? You're having the wrong conversations. We've done this before. We've got we call it a wall of learning in the old days. We went out to do connected farm trials 3 or 4 years ago, and we rolled out network with no solution and no use cases, and we hadn't actually costed it out. So ROI is key in that, and if you're not having that conversation with the customer, you're probably either going to get into a POC that won't complete or won't move to pilot stage.
Can you give us some examples of it at play where you've worked with a customer and you've revolutionised something that they were doing into something much more efficient?
Yeah, look, you can go from the simple end, which I'll talk about first, to one of the more complex ones. We're talking about fish catch, but really simple, basic solution that didn't exist to retrofit into DHBs for fridge monitoring vaccines during COVID. Huge amount of cost loss for a small change in temperature in fridge monitoring for the vaccines. We went in there with a proof of concept facing an ROI on it, and during the proof of concept, one of the fridges went down and cost them more than the solution actually cost for the year. Very quickly, that created the impetus for adoption of a pilot across that DHB and a number of sites, and it did speed up a lot of the integration work that was there. So even though it was a simple use case, it was something that wasn't considered to be required. It was human recording during the time, which was inaccurate, and very quickly moved to a pilot stage and a rollout and delivered on the return on investment. Just a really simple use case in fridge monitoring, and then you go up to what is in train at the moment with fish catch monitoring, where actually the whole project requires a model that's got to go out at scale to, create the AI models that will eventually mean at the edge the fish catch is measured, and basically it's a sustainability model, it's a compliance model. You have to do all of that work in the background to actually create that solution together, and therefore that's transformational, right? But that takes time, cost, people, and in that case it takes us to actually do a scale proof of concept. So they're sort of two extremes.
When we're talking about time, cost, and scale, it's often three things that a small business doesn't have. And New Zealand is dominated by small businesses. So, Michael, is this the kind of stuff that can be adopted by small businesses, or do you have to be at the big end of town before you can even dip your toe in the water here?
No, absolutely. I think for any size business and organisation, there's opportunity to take technology to change those things I talked about. So whether that's taking complexity out of your business, being able to demonstrate compliance, all those things I think relate as much in a small business as in a large business. It comes down, I guess, to the ROI and in the way you think about the problem. So some problems are going to be will only make sense to invest where you've got a scaled organisation with a scaled problem. And that's where the importance we've kind of already talked about around identifying the business problem and making sure that your technology approach is aligned to the business problem, and that you've thought through, well, what is the value of solving this problem? For a small business, I mean, Tony's talked about fridge monitoring. That's a really good example that can be applied in a really small business. In our IoT business, we have tracking solutions, monitoring solutions, a range of different technologies, which can make a real difference. Whether you're running a business with 5 vehicles or 500 vehicles, being able to understand where they are, what they're doing, being able to comply and report, all those things are also really critical. So I think it becomes about, what's the scale of the problem. For us, we can kind of help to, I guess, curate and bring standardised solutions, that help to kind of help in that space.
That's a really good point. So Tony, are there just plug and play solutions that you can just kind of adapt slightly to another business, which might be a less expensive option than something that's completely bespoke, trialling it from proof of concept through to implementation?
Yeah, I think that's where Spark play is coming in with scale network and scale partnerships, and the reach to all the customers we have across the range from government enterprise right through to SME, is we provide that capability to access lower cost, repeatable solutions, as we've just talked about. Could be fridge monitoring, could be vehicle tracking, and that way small businesses can access that because we've invested in the partnership and the scale to roll it out. We have everything from rollout services, implementations, etc. As you get up the stack with bigger organisations that want a more integrated solution, and then we can tailor to that and do a customised solution, that will tend to be where you go. Even with a developed solution, there will be adjustments that are needed to fit into a larger organisation. So we provide the partnership model to do both.
Peter, when it comes to the robots that are doing the drudge work or the dirty work, does that have to be something that you're investing at a large scale, or are there like entry-level robots that I can use in my small warehouse, for example?
The good thing about robots is once you've solved the problem once, they tend to be pretty easy to install a second time. So I would tell you that with Cypher Robotics, the majority of our clients are only utilizing 1 or 2 at scale. And that's the beauty about robotics in some cases, is that a simpler approach is better. So when it comes to SMEs versus large organizations, we can now close that gap and competitive advantage a little bit by deploying some of these. So some robotic solutions will absolutely be required at scale, but I can tell you that the most successful robotics organizations are actually focused on scale among many versus scale among one, right? And that means if we're solving some really challenging problems, it's not a challenging problem for one organization, but maybe there's 50 or 60 or 100 organizations that have the same problem. And if they all have the same problem, we know that the problem is really big at scale. And so by deploying in small numbers, we're solving a very large problem.
So it isn't like I have to meet some sort of turnover threshold to bother engaging with robotics or the software that's going to implement the AI. You don't necessarily have to be a big business to start looking at this stuff.
No, and I think we're starting to see a lot more SMEs actually tackle this, and I'm enjoying a lot of those conversations because, let's be honest, the larger corporations are the ones that are the slowest moving. So they are the most difficult to penetrate sometimes in these organizations. And we're finding that these SMEs are able to utilize this technology and secure a real advantage over some of the big conglomerates that do move a little bit slower. So we're actually seeing a lot more momentum in that smaller to medium-sized business for this new technology.
Is that also true of Ipsotek, Chris? Is it you can still get the return on investment even if you're at the smaller end of the scale?
Absolutely. And a lot of what we do is, it's not just security-based analytics, but it's also health and safety. It can be looking at, like I said earlier, about arenas. So you could start something small and scale it up, and that's the beauty of the solutions that we have.
Tony, how do you help a business evaluate whether what they're looking at is like a nice to have that's nifty and you can say, hey, does cool stuff, versus something that is actually going to deliver return on investment?
I think one of the things that's been happening here today, and we do normally, is what we call immersion sessions with customers, and that can be quite simple or quite detailed. And the first thing we're doing in that case is, what are the use cases that they're trying to solve for? Is it a compliance issue, a health and safety issue? We're talking about return on investment, but before you even do that, you want to recognise what are the key problems in their business, what is a priority for them to solve for, and what is a nice to have. And then we bring together with partners the solutions that may or may not solve that, and start the early stages of figuring out how we could test that out within proof of concept, how that would work within their business from a time, resource and cost perspective. And obviously we want to do a lot of that quickly and efficiently, and not too expensive. If you start with a very expensive proof of concept, you'll probably slow the thing down at the beginning. So I think what we like to call immersion sessions, we use our innovation studio for that as well. It's about getting in and finding out what the use cases and needs are. A lot of the time we'll be selling a lot of technology to customers. We won't necessarily go down those paths of looking at, you know, is computer vision for health and safety in your warehouse a really important thing? Yes or no? What are the costs to your business at the moment? What else have you got going on in that space? So that's where we start.
Yeah, and I suppose for both Chris and Peter, it's not only the initial investment involved, right? There are ongoing costs with the technology from a software perspective and the technology from the hardware of the robots. So how do we ensure that it's not only that initial investment that's delivering the return on investment, but the underlying costs are also sustainable? What do you think, Chris?
So with our customers, we look at the through life cost of the project. So with that, we're very open with our partners and their customers as to what is the total cost over a period of time that you're going to amortize this project, or the hardware or the software. And that's important because it allows us to really understand, you know, if the customer's paying software maintenance on an annual basis, what do they achieve for that? What do they receive? What's the value to their organization? So we're very clear with our partners and our customers where that value is.
And how do you see that, Peter?
I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to say solve the really big problems. And I think that's what we are tackling right now. One of the things that we like to say is that, you know, when we do a comparison, the gap between what our clients are doing today versus what we're installing is so big that there's a lot of room in there to fail a little bit. So that's one approach. If it is a little tight, if we're competing at a scale that's a little bit smaller, that is a much more difficult discussion that requires quite a bit of analytics to see how a business actually runs. So, but I think our approach is really, you know, you're doing this, we'll do this. If the gap is so large, how do you say no?
What are the indicators that tell you that an organization is ready for that leap? And I suppose the flip side of that is, what are the indicators that tell you it is not ready to take that leap? Do you have some thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, look, it's pretty obvious when a customer has compliance, health and safety issues, cost issues, or potential opportunities around productivity. So once you get into the weeds with the customer on that, that's going to give you the direction of what to go after. Sometimes I think we talked about this before, sometimes it feels like there's a little bit of a tech for tech's sake conversation that's going on of what are the things we could trial. And I think that's the important where you chisel down and pick out something that will still have benefit to them, that they can fit into what they do. And then the other thing is you've got to make sure you get the right parts of the business. Sometimes it's not always the areas of the business that you need to focus on that would normally purchase IT, and you might need to go into operations facilities, marketing, for example, and do that. So I think if you get to that stage where you're having a tech for tech conversation as a good partner both with us and the partners we bring in, what we don't want to be doing is trying to introduce cost and testing stuff without an outcome.
And I know you said right at the beginning, Chris, if you sit down with a company to begin with and you don't think that your solution is going to solve their problem, you turn them away. Is it the same thing if you just think, okay, they do need our solution, but they are not ready to implement it yet, that you would do the same? Hey, go back and you've got some more homework to do here.
Absolutely. You know, the one thing that we pride ourselves on is a level of transparency with customers. If the solution that they're looking for that solves their business problem is not based on our platform, we'll be completely open with them. And that's really important from not just a professional approach, but these are customers who in future times will come back and say, thank you for that advice. We've gone down this path. We've now reached a point where we do need an enterprise solution. And that's where we can work with our partners and satisfy their needs.
Is that true also at Cypher, or are there ways that you can bring them on the journey? For example, in the warehouse, we need to reconfigure this warehouse so that we can have a drone in here or have a robot in here. So they're not ready, but they could be ready.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in our industry is internal change management. So that's actually quite a big conversation that we have with all of our clients, right? We're not changing things on a small scale. I would like to think we are, but really when you change an entire inventory management process within an organization, that feels like a big change to our clients. So the internal discussion around what does change management look like within an organization is one that we have often. And we get a good feel for our organizations as to where they are in that process. The really advanced companies that don't struggle with change management, they might have 8, 10, 12 initiatives. So it might be an understanding as to where yours is in the priority. Are you number 1? Are you number 6? Those that don't deal with change management well, those are the ones that, yes, you're going to take them by the hand and hold it a little bit longer and take them on the journey with you to really understand what it is about their change management process that is difficult to take on, right? So,
because when we're talking about change management, we're actually not talking about the technology. We're talking about the management of the people and the processes that implement the technology, right? So it's a people problem.
Yeah, it's a business culture internally, right? So robotics in particular has had somewhat of a bad name in the past in that there is a misnomer that we are looking to take jobs, right? On top of that, if the entire solution isn't clear to all of the employees, all of the stakeholders, what and how the technology impacts their business, it also becomes very difficult. So as a prime example, we will spend a lot of our time ensuring that warehouse managers enter these C-level conversations. They need to be there. So we can have C-level conversations all day long, but the person that's going to implement all of these changes, if they don't know what's happening, they're going to push back.
And if they don't understand why.
Correct.
Right? So taking them on the journey, because I guess the risk is some of those people start bearing the brunt of the disruption, the added training, all of those things. So it's about making sure those people at the front line are supported.
Yeah, and so these are big decisions that involve C-level management. We're going to get IT involved, right? We're going to get the warehouse staff members involved. And each and every one of them is going to take a second look at the technology and say, well, what do I have to do to implement this, right? How much work is involved for me? Is this just being dumped in my lab? And these are parts of the change management process. So we might be very good at top level to say, we're very forward thinking. But if we don't get the entire chain involved in that decision-making process to understand the why, we're not going to be able to make what I would consider a small change, but within their organization, a big change to make this happen.
It's actually a theme that's come up several times over the past day and a half, that this is not about just bolting on technology solutions. It's actually about taking the whole organization along with you and looking at everything within it rather than just little bit parts. Michael, I wondered if you could help us understand. We've heard Chris and Peter talk a couple of times about working with our partners. What does that mean? How are you involved with your international partners to bring these solutions here?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's the core of what we do is at Spark, we understand networks, we understand technology. We have New Zealand-based people that are on the end of phones that have skills to be able to get out into the field and both deploy and manage solutions. So I guess for us, the way we think about it, our value comes in bringing global best practice solutions together with a local ability to both kind of have conversations with customers, to think about how do we build ROI with our customers for those technologies, but then to deploy them and manage them and make sure that they work and continue to work. So I guess our value comes in really being able to stitch those pieces together. And what we see in technology increasingly is we need, technology only works when you have networks that come together with data sitting somewhere in a cloud that's managed on a platform, and then in all of these instances, there's hardware or things, physical things that need to kind of come together with that to actually make the solution work. And Spark has the experience and capability to bring those pieces together. So that's really where we see ourselves playing.
So that, Tony, is that you and your team? You're the ones on the ground getting the calls. If customers have a problem with something that's being delivered from some offshore supplier, you're it.
Yeah, we're the front line of that, but we have a full service management, service delivery. We have all our technical specialists. We have rollout services. We have other parts of our business or partner companies like Intalar for rollout services. We have our converged tech specialist groups. We have our service lines. So we front a whole range of services and activities. And as Michael said, the whole benefit to us is our reach to our customers. It's our regional reach. We have physically presence in all areas of New Zealand. We are, at a backbone, we're the largest IoT network provider in New Zealand. So we have that reach proven out, and most of these solutions need network of some sort. So yes, we're the front of that, but we're backed by a very large group of people, all delivering parts of that solution with our partners.
And Chris and Peter, is this your way of accessing or supplying the New Zealand market that you otherwise wouldn't be doing, that if you didn't have this connection on the ground helping to facilitate?
Absolutely. And for us, what's really important is when we deliver a solution to an end customer, that the support that is required in country is trained and educated by us, and we have that capability here with Spark.
Peter?
I mean, we're about to finish, and I'll give a good plug to Spark. We would not be here without Spark. From Canada, I have to say New Zealand wasn't high on our priority list to begin with, to be completely upfront, mainly because I'm just uneducated on the marketplace to begin with. A few conversations later, we understand the true value of an organization like Spark in helping us launch here in New Zealand in a much bigger marketplace than we anticipated, and being able to solve some challenging problems here is much easier with Spark than without you guys. So we appreciate all of the partnerships that we've had.
We always appreciate a plug for Spark to round out Spark Accelerate. So please give our panel a very big round of applause. Michael, Peter, Chris, and Tony. Thank you, gentlemen.